Hello and welcome back. Today I'm finishing off the original Killzone trilogy by reviewing the PS3's Killzone 3. Even though technically it's the fourth game in the series, but I guess PSP spin-offs don't count. Let's get started with the story. The story takes place about 6 months after the end of Killzone 2, where the ISA forces have been driven off Helghast by a massive reinforcement of weapons and technology that the Helghast had stored up their arse somewhere. However, the death of Scholar Vasari has left a bit of a power struggle in the Helghast ranks, mainly between the head of the Helghast Navy, Admiral Orlok, and the chairman of Helghast's armed company, Johann Stahl, who's voiced by none other than Malcolm McDowell, which I guess somewhat makes up for the absence of Sean Pertwee in this game. The game stars two of the protagonists from the previous game, Seven Rico, not to be confused with Seven Grandad, who have disguised themselves in Helghast uniforms and have infiltrated one of Stahl's bases, only for it to then immediately flash back to moments just after the second game, so that was kind of pointless. After Rico gets chewed out by his commanding officer for killing Vasari, they head off to try and evacuate themselves off the planet, fighting Helghast along the way. However, the ships they are evacuating on get attacked by a Helghast walker that I can only describe as an aircraft carrier with legs. A bunch of ISA troops get left behind and Seven Rico gets separated in the confusion. Sev, his commanding officer, and some of the remaining ISA troops hide out in one of Helghast's forests for several months, trying to gather up communications equipment from the downed ISA ships. Sev and the commanding officer, however, are captured by the Helghast, only for Sev to get rescued by Rico and his own small group of remaining ISA troops. Sev and Rico then bust into a few Helghast facilities trying to find the location of their commander. Once they do, they steal a couple of Helghast uniforms and sneak into one of their bases, which, as you remember, is where the game begins. They save their commanding officer and humiliate Stahl in a public broadcast in the process, and just before they escape, they manage to find out that the Helghast are weaponizing an element called petrocite. The Helghast have installed a massive petrocite bomb on their super duper special Helghast spaceship and planned for it to hyperdrive all the way to Earth, drop its petrocite payload, wiping out almost all life on Earth, and somehow they think that will win them the war. Sev, Rico and the rest of their ISA pals travel through a Helghast scrapyard, defeat the walker as big as a battleship from earlier on,
as big as a battleship,
and travel to a space elevator that goes up to a satellite. Seriously, first Xenoblade Chronicles and now this game, what is the big deal with space elevators? However, it turns out Stahl did most of their job for them, having murdered the now autarch Orlok and blowing up most of the Helghast fleet that remained loyal to Orlok. Sev and Rico pilfer a couple of Helghast starfighters, track down Stahl to his SDSHS, blow up the ship's vital components, sending it crashing into the Helgen, detonating the bomb, causing billions of deaths and leaving the planet uninhabitable. Whoops. Oh, and there's a post-credit scene that implies Stahl survived. He does show up in Killzone Shadowfall after all. The controls are basically the same setup as Killzone 2, with placement of the crouch and zoom button included. The amount of weapons has been increased back up to 3, including a light weapon that you'll hardly ever use, although the controls themselves feel a lot smoother and a lot less laggy than the previous title, although I've heard from some reviewers that the stiff and heavy controls in Killzone 2 were actually intentional to try and simulate the weight of the gun, which, while an interesting idea, I feel it's one of those attempts at realism that they should have left at the door. A medium weapon that you will use most of the time, and a heavy weapon you will use at special occasions and you can usually find lying around somewhere when you need it. Oh, and also several types of the grenades. They also try and change up the gameplay sometimes, like moments when you're in a mech or piloting a snowmobile or flying around with a jetpack or a couple of rail segments. The gameplay is mostly solid, although I do have one criticism. It seems the enemy AI might be a little too accurate. I frequently found myself dead in the blink of an eye if I wasn't properly crouched behind a wall or close by to Rico or the commander to defib me. The graphics are a lot smoother and more detailed than the previous instalment, and are arguably some of the best graphics on the PS3 that I've seen. It still conveys that gritty and war-torn feel without it being as grey or as gloomy as the previous one, helped by the fact that the locations are a lot more varied this time around. Not quite sure about the changes to the Helghast aesthetic, but at least they still remain recognisable. Oh, and the game's also compatible with 3D TVs, you know, because that's totally enough as a selling point back then. The music's alright. It fits reasonably well, but isn't exactly memorable, for me at least. Sadly, no Helghast March this time around. Guess Chairman Stahl murdered that as well. One audio glitch that I did notice is that when a character is delivering dialogue in the middle of a firefight, he can get interrupted and causing him to repeat the same line multiple times. I'm not sure if this is just an issue in my version or is something that generally happens in all versions of the game. This game's pretty good. Well, it doesn't do anything remarkable or groundbreaking. For the most part, what it does well. While I'm not sure I could say this is either better or worse than Killzone 2, I can definitely say this feels the more polished of the two games. Well, that's all from me. See you guys next time. Can you please let me go now? Not in your fucking life. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Yep. Well, can you at least get me some food? I've eaten nothing for several months. Here you go. But this is cat food. Dig in. And the chairman of Helghast's arms company, Johann Stahl, who's voiced by Plane. This game's pretty good. Well, it doesn't do anything groundbreaking or brand new.
Brown new.